So, my name's Kara-Leah, and this is my memoir, Sex, Drugs, and Mostly Yoga. I published it in 2018, and finally this year in 2020, I got around to recording the audiobook. And the audiobook is now available in a multitude of places. It's not yet on Audible, but by the time you watch this video, it probably will be. So I thought that I would read you a prologue from this book so you can get a taste for it and see if it's something that you want to purchase on Audible, or you can buy the paperback or the Kindle version or the Mobi version, whichever version you want. They're all out there now. So, Sex, Drugs, and Mostly Yoga. Field Notes from Kundalini Awakening. Prologue. On August 21st, 2004, I was admitted to Lionsgate Hospital's acute psych ward by Dr. Alex Ritchie, who stated, "This woman is psychotic. She has very disorganized thoughts, poor insight, and poor judgment. She is a risk to herself." My Canadian fiance had driven me from our home in Whistler, Canada, to the Vancouver hospital late on Friday night. It was 3 a.m. when we arrived at the emergency department. That day, I had slipped into trance, speaking in a different voice and a different language. There is no mention of that language in the hospital notes, although my fiancé heard it clearly, telling me later it sounded like ancient Egyptian. Dr. Philip Severy, who wrote the consultation report on that August visit to Lionsgate Hospital, saw me the next morning. He noted that I was a 29-year-old woman who has had a first break manic psychosis following heavy use of hallucinogenic drugs including marijuana, LSD, mushrooms, and MDMA. She is unable to protect herself, behaving bizarrely. She has no insight and is in denial of reality, therefore cannot be admitted as a voluntary patient. Like much of the hospital records of that stay, and the second stay I had a month later after a second manic psychotic break, there are inaccuracies in this assessment. The heavy use reported by the doctor referred to half a tab of acid, 1 MDMA pill, and a gram of mushrooms that I'd had the previous weekend at a 4-day music festival. I'd also smoked 2 joints that week. The bizarre behavior included getting down on my hands and knees in the doctor's office and doing prostrations to the sun god Ra in all 4 directions, while the doctor and my fiance looked on. Yeah, bizarre for sure in that context, but in the context of being an Egyptian high priestess, pretty damn normal. Only I wasn't an Egyptian high priestess, at least not in this lifetime. I was a freelance journalist living in a small mountain town in British Columbia and engaged to be married to a Canadian bartender. I'd been there for nearly 7 years, waitressing, go-go dancing, writing a screenplay and short stories, and working as a journalist. Oh, and taking shitloads of drugs, it's true, while practicing yoga and meditation. But at the time of my admittance to Lionsgate Hospital, I'd been taking less and less drugs and doing more and more yoga. And I'd been under severe emotional stress and an increasingly strained relationship with my fiance, a relationship that I did not have the skills to navigate. The verdict from the doctors on my admittance to the acute psych ward was drug-induced manic psychosis. The reality was far broader than that. The psychological defense patterns I'd constructed during childhood were in overdrive, attempting to protect me from the heartache of dealing with my failing relationship. And I was undergoing a major spiritual emergence as my ability to work with energy, know the future, and understand multi-dimensional reality came online. I didn't know it then, but I was clairaudient, clairsentient, and claircognizant. My medical notes allude to this a few times. Patient admits to having had auditory hallucinosis, but is vague about the content. This was my clairaudient ability ramping up. In my discharge notes, it also says, was behaving in bizarre ways, using her hands to direct energy fields around various people. In the context of all this, it was evident she was losing grip over reality. That's true, I did lose grip over reality, even as I was becoming aware of my ability to use my hands to direct energy around people, something I now do as part of my work, facilitating deep psychological healing and release. I was discharged from Lionsgate 2 days later, on August 23rd, 2004. My diagnosis at discharge was bipolar type 2 with a manic psychosis induced by hallucinogenic drugs. Dr. Philip Severy prescribed me olanzapine to be discontinued after 2 weeks and Epivil to be taken for several months. I recall seeing a nurse for a follow-up about 2 weeks later and telling her that I felt great and asking if I needed to continue taking the drugs. She said no, and so I stopped. A week or so later, my fiance broke up with me and moved out of our house. It was a Tuesday night, and I remember being aware that the next day was my father's birthday in New Zealand. And that's what makes reading my medical notes so fascinating. I have an intimate recall of so many details from that particular time in my life, and yet what is written in the medical notes seems so often wrong and almost completely devoid of all content of the 2 experiences of psychosis that I had. Small things, these facts, and yet they leap out at me when I read the medical notes. This is wrong, and this is wrong, and that is wrong. Oh, and wow, look at how my fiance framed that. Oh, ex-fiance. Waking up in the psych ward the second time around was terrifying. Not just because I was committed again and unable to leave, but also because the emotional reality of my life finally began to hit me. Except I was in a locked ward and felt unable to be vulnerable with anyone around me. I couldn't tell anyone what was really going on inside of me, and there was no one there to back me up. I felt alone, adrift, and profoundly lost. This memoir is a story of how I found my way back from that place and reclaimed my experiences through a lens and a context that made sense to me. But this memoir is not what happened either. It's just my perspective at this point in time. I've written it for myself and for all the other people like myself who experience multi-dimensional reality in a world that tells them time is linear and the universe is mechanicistic. It's not. The universe is a play of consciousness, the one, masquerading as the many. In Tantra yoga, the path I follow, one simply dissolves into consciousness. All sense of the individual self falls away. Yet, to have this experience too soon or too fast is fraught with danger, as our psychological constructs need to be dismantled with care and love. Too much knowing in too short a time, with too little context and grounding, can lead to all kinds of apparent mental illness, including psychotic experiences. My consciousness was evolving and my psyche was breaking open as part of the healing and growth process. I know this. I know it because I've lived this evolution of consciousness all the way into integration and wholeness. And this is what I want to share with you now. My story, my 14-year journey, my healing, and my emergence into a being that can navigate the true nature of reality while staying firmly centered and grounded in an apparently separate sense of self. Because while the doctors in the psych ward diagnosed me bipolar 2 and said that I'd had 2 episodes of manic psychosis, I always suspected something different had happened. And if you want to find out what happens or what happened, you're going to have to go and buy the book. Or you might be able to find it in your local library, because it is in the local library. And every now and then I distribute random copies in random places so people can discover them and find them. So I will put down below this YouTube video where you can buy in case you're interested in buying. And just sending so much love to you all, and particularly those of you that have had any kind of spiritual emergence or Kundalini Awakening experience that has tipped over into any kind of psychosis. Blessings on your path. May you discover and find the support that you need so that you too can heal and recover and come out so much stronger on the other side. Big love to you all.